This is my 12th opportunity to get to be here. And, there have been people, we talk about the different ones that have been here. There's some that have come and some that have gone and some that left and came back. And so kind of a mixture of people. And then some of you that's just been here the whole time that I've been coming. And we always look forward to coming. We love you all. And I was in my 40s when I first started coming here. And I'm not going to tell you my age, but I'm in the last year of the 50s. And so you can figure it out. I've been here coming for a little while now, and I was dark-headed, or a little darker-headed back then when I first came. But it's been amazing to me how much you guys here are talked about back in Arkansas. We talk about you guys just like you were part of our church family right there. And I've got a lot of people in my congregation that know you guys, but will never meet you personally. But they know of you, and I share things with them often about you. And you've been a blessing to me, blessing to Art, and we appreciate you giving us this opportunity. I want to jump right into our lesson. You can go to John chapter 20. We're going to start there and go to a couple of different places, so keep your Bible out. John 20, we'll look at verse 19 and 20 in just a little bit. Last year when we left here, I got home and we took a little vacation, a little family vacation to Chattanooga. Anybody in here ever been to Chattanooga, Tennessee? A few of you. We headed that way and wanted to do a couple of things there. And as we're driving along, I read this billboard because that's what I do. I read billboards when we're driving. And in fact, I come from a long line of billboard readers. My grandfather, McFadden, he was a billboard reader, but he read them all out loud. And he was the most annoying man on trips. And he didn't read just the side you were going on. He'd read anything over on the other side too. You didn't miss one. He got them all in, and it would drive us crazy. So I read them, but I read them to myself so I won't bother people. But I came upon this billboard. There's lots of them going into Chattanooga. There's a lot of things they advertise. But there was this one billboard that said, "Forgive as Christ forgave." Out of all those advertisements there was one that said that. They had a lot of things like caverns that they wanted you to see, Lookout Mountain, and different things that are there. But this one on just a big white board with big red letters said, "Forgive as Jesus forgave. Forgive as Christ forgave." Everybody in the van was asleep except me, so it gave me time to think about this thing. Here's this one billboard, and it just hit me. Forgive like Jesus forgave. Do I do that? I mean, is that part of me? And what does that even mean, to forgive like Christ forgave? How did he forgive? I want to show you John chapter 20, 19 and 20. It says, "Then the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, that Jesus came and stood in the midst of them and said to them, 'Peace be with you.' When he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. And then the disciples were glad when they saw the Lord." Let's stop there. When you follow the timeline and you see this chapter, it begins with the empty tomb, and so you back up and you have him placed in the tomb, then go back and he's on the cross. You know the things that are going on, the trial and everything right before that. And so when you follow that timeline with Jesus and his disciples, really, they should not be on the best of terms right now. Remember, all the disciples had abandoned Jesus. Art mentioned this last night, that they, this is one of the darkest times in the life of Jesus, because all of his people left him. I mean, they're gone. And so those disciples, they ran, they hid in fear. And even Peter denied that he even knew Jesus, not just once and not just twice, but 3 times. He said, "I don't know Jesus." And so you think of that. And so he comes in this room and he says, peace be with you. He didn't come in there and just blast them. He didn't come in and just jump all over them and condemn them and accuse them and just, the first thing out of Jesus' mouth was peace. Peace be with you. Now, he didn't mention how they had treated him. He didn't mention how they had left him. And I can't find a point where the disciples came to Jesus and said, Lord, we quit you. We abandoned you. We left you. We betrayed you. We denied you. Will you please forgive us? I don't read that anywhere. Maybe it happened. But what I do know is Jesus forgave them anyway. And as I read that billboard driving along there, I thought, forgive as Christ forgave. Man, that's exactly what I need to be doing. That needs to be me. I need to forgive, just like Jesus forgave. To be quite honest with you, I've always thought that I needed some qualifiers in order to forgive someone. That, if someone, hurt me in some way, that they're going to have to meet certain stipulations before I really forgive them. So, if they come and they apologize to me, okay, I'll forgive. If they come and say, just kind of show me some sadness, maybe a little remorse, and I can tell it, okay, I'll forgive you. If they come and just promise, you know what, Paul, I will never do that again. I was wrong. I'm not going to do that again. Okay, I forgive you. Church, forgiveness should never be conditional like that. And yet we do that sometimes. Jesus went to the cross before any of you sitting in here was born. Now, Art's, he's on up there, but even before Art was born, Jesus went to the cross and he died for us. He died for our sins so that forgiveness would be possible for us. Long before he knew you, long before he knew what sin was going to be in your life, he died for you. He forgives lovingly. He loves us unconditionally. And so the question I have for you tonight is there someone in your life that needs that forgiveness? Whether they've asked for it or not. Is there someone there? I think it's important, that we forgive like Jesus forgave. We should be, as Christians, we should model that. That should be something that's a part of us. And so in our lives, maybe it's a parent that we need to forgive. Maybe it's a sibling that we have. Maybe just someone that was a good friend. Maybe you haven't spoken to them in years and years. Is there someone in your life like that? The power of forgiveness that Jesus showed us as he hung on the cross is what we read. I want you to go to Luke chapter 23. We're going to spend more of our time in Luke chapter 23. And when you read verse 34, we'll read verses around there in just a little bit, but go to 34, and you remember this verse. Jesus is on the cross, and he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. As he looked down below him that day, and looked down maybe past some bloody feet that's on the cross, and he sees people down there, some gambling for his clothes. He says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And I'm sure he said it with a passion. You'd like to be able to hear Jesus, his accents and all those things. I'm sure there was a passion when he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. There was a love, there was a compassion in his heart when he did that. I want you to hold your spot there in Luke 23, but I need us to go to Matthew chapter 6 for a moment. Go to the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 6, and look at verse 14 and 15. Jesus has been preaching the Beatitudes, the salt, the light, all those things early on there. But there in chapter 6, 14 and 15, he had just gone through the Lord's Prayer there. He says, for if you forgive men their trespasses, this is Christ talking, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. When you read these particular verses here, it might create a little panic in your life. If someone did something bad, and it's like, how can you forgive someone who's done something that seems like it's unforgivable? By the way, you ever notice that we tend to look at other people's sins as unforgivable? They did something. That's the unforgivable sin right there. Never ours, but when we look at other people and their mistakes and their problems, their sins, how can I forgive that? And so Jesus preaching there, some of that. Now go back to Luke 23. I want to back up to verse 32. Let's go back through 34. There were also 2 criminals led with him to be put to death. And when they had come to the place called Calvary, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on the right hand and the other on the left. Then Jesus said, what we read a moment ago, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. When you go back and you look at things that were going on, there was so much torture involved in what Jesus was going through. This was a humiliating type of punishment and death that he would have to endure here. And he would be mocked. I mean, there's just a lot of things that they were doing to him. And when people were at their very worst, that's when Jesus would say that. I want you to help me finish this. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Say it with me again. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That's Christ talking there. When people down below him, even his own disciples that are scattered, and yet he wanted to forgive them. Jesus was forgiving at a moment that forgiveness for what they'd done just didn't seem right. Now, let's make it personal. Let's get to us. We all, I think, get hurt in life. Sometime or another, we're going to get hurt by other people. We're going to get taken advantage of. We're going to get lied to. We're going to get cheated on. Christians are not going to act like Christians toward us sometimes. We're going to be gossiped about. And some of you may have been hurt by someone that's not even alive anymore. And yet you hang on to that. We have a tendency to do that. Not going to let go of something. Maybe even you have an anger against God. And you're wondering, God, why did you let this happen in my life? And maybe that's not the prayer we need to pray. Maybe what we should do is change our prayer to God, help me to serve you with what happened to me. If something happened, and instead of questioning God, why did this happen? God, what can you do? How can you take that and use me with that? Maybe God's forgiven you, but you haven't forgiven yourself about something. And so you carry around a guilt and a bitterness and maybe that unforgiveness. You keep it with you. And so the question then comes back to that billboard that I saw there. How do I forgive like Jesus forgave? And so tonight, listen, I'm going to just give you two things. Maybe the butterscotch will hold off. I got 2 points I want to make with this. And it's a couple of things that sound easy, but they're hard. They're hard for us to do. They're not that easy. Number one is this. Jesus teaches us to pray for those who hurt us. Yeah, that sounds pretty easy, doesn't it? Jesus teaches us to pray for people that have hurt us, but it's not that easy. In Luke chapter 6 and verse 28, Jesus said, "Bless those who curse you and pray for those who spitefully use you." And then Matthew's account in Matthew chapter 5:43 says, "You've heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies and bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. Pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you." And so Matthew's account, it expands it a little bit and it tells some things there. Love your neighbor and hate your enemy is what you've heard in the past. But that's not what I want you to do. When Jesus said this, at this moment in the Sermon on the Mount, I bet it was one of those times you could hear that pin drop. People are listening and they've heard the Beatitudes, they've heard different things there, and now Jesus says, I want you to love your enemies. I bet it was quiet for a little while. They're thinking, did he just say that? Did he really mean that? No way he could have said that. Because see, we love our neighbor, but hate our enemy. That's what we're supposed to do. Someone wrongs you, you wrong them back. That eye for an eye. That's what we know they're thinking. But Jesus says, no, wait a second, let me tell you how it needs to be. Let me tell you what it's really like. And saying to love our enemies, that sounds great until you get an enemy. Then it gets hard. Once you have that enemy, now loving your enemy, I'm not sure about that. It gets pretty hard then. So, if you've been devastated by someone, if you've been lied about by someone, if you've been gossiped about by someone, one of the first things Jesus says, I want you to do is pray for them. Now, he said it there in Matthew, to love your enemies, bless the ones that curse you, do good to them, and then he says to pray for those people. So we need to be praying for those that have hurt us in some way. Praying for people changes our attitude towards those people. Now, your prayer may not change that person. That person may go on and be just like they were. It may not change them. But what I've learned is that it can sure change you. When you pray about a person, you take a person to God, you begin to love them. You begin to love your enemy. That's what Jesus is after. I don't want you to hate your enemy. I want you to love your neighbor. I want you to love your enemy too. It's been over 10 years since my daughter, Paige, had an accident that she was in just a whisper of her life being taken. And I've told you about her. You as a church prayed about her 10 years ago and back in 2012. And I need to tell you something about that tonight. As she and I would meet each other on the road, we had about a 6-mile stretch where when she left her house going to work, I left my house going to work, we would cross paths somewhere along that 6-mile stretch. And we'd call one another on the phone, and that day was no different than any other day. I told her, I love you, Paigey. Paigey, that's what I called her. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And then we hung up. I took a phone call at work. As soon as I got there, they said, "Are you Mr. McFadden?" And I'm going to skip a little bit. Let me fast forward just a little bit. The helicopter landed there on the road, and she was taken to the trauma center in Memphis. And we would spend the next 40 days and 40 nights, it sounds biblical, recovering and trying to survive. We're battling infections, surgeries, broken back, lost kidney, damaged liver, 10 broken ribs, arteries that were damaged. And what had happened, it all started with a vehicle that swerved across the center of the road, and it caused my daughter then to react, run off the edge of the road. Her vehicle rode several times, then it flipped several times and ejected her from this vehicle. Here's where I'm going to tell you something that I've never told anyone. I've not told Art this. I have not told my family this. This was a struggle that I had when it comes to forgiveness. I asked my daughter for details. I wanted to hear just from her what happened that day. So she began to tell me and told me that it was a black SUV that she had met before on the road that swerved, came across, and I got off the road, Dad, and then that's what happened. It ran her off the road, and this person just kept driving after this vehicle flips and flops, and he left this little girl in the middle of a bean field freezing on January the 18th. Now, I don't tell you this story, and I don't want you to get me wrong, to pity her or to pity us or anything like that. That's not at all what I want you to do. Even though it totally changed her life, and she's not able to work, and there are things like that. But God had something in mind for her, and it was to be a great mother. She's got three of the cutest 7 grandkids in the United States of America live at her house, which is my house right now that they're living in. And she's done a wonderful job, and Art can tell you that she's a wonderful girl and mother to these 3 babies. But I tell you this tonight because of my reaction to what happened that day. Now, I'd been preaching a long time. Over 30 years then, over 40 now. And so I'd been preaching a long time. I talked a lot about forgiveness. And I preached about salvation. I preached about mercy and grace and all those things that we need in our lives. But this particular time in my life, I was an angry dad. That's what I was. I was struggling as a father. And so, as a dad that had to drive this road every day and be reminded of it, on the way to work, on the way back from work, a dad that wanted to know who on God's green earth would leave a person in the middle of a field freezing to death. I wanted to meet that person. Well, this is what I've not told anyone, I began to drive that road every morning. I'd get up early, and it's about a 2-mile stretch down to the highway, and there's a little convenience store down there. So I'd drive down there, and I'd turn around, drive back, and kind of watch my clock, trying to get to work on time, but I just wanted to see if I could meet a black SUV somewhere along that way. And so I did this for a couple of months. Well, in the meantime, I stopped down at this local little gas station, grocery store, and stopped there and get a drink on the way to work. And this fellow that kept saying something to me in the store, how's your daughter doing? I didn't know who he was. How's your daughter doing? And I talked to him a little bit. And he was always really nervous around me. And I watched him as he drove off this one particular day, and it was in a company truck that had a name on the side of it, so kind of knew where he worked at. But one of those days that I was driving this road, I met a black SUV. And so I decided I'm going to follow this vehicle. Ended up down at the store. So I went in as well. And this same man is the one that got out of the black SUV. And so the dad in me at this point and the Christian in me was fighting each other. I mean, it was a battle. And so I had no proof of anything. I'm just guessing about all this. But I had a pretty good idea. And I just wanted to ask this guy why. Well, here's the bottom line. I needed to forgive this guy because it was killing me. It was frustrating me. I was having struggles preaching during that period of time. And so I met him there in the store one day, and I said, I got to get this past me. And so I just went over to him and stuck out my hand, and I said, I appreciate you asking about my daughter like you do, and I just want to say God bless you. And stepped away from him, and that was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. He didn't really know what was going on with me. But I did, and the Lord did. And there was such a huge burden, though, that was lifted from me. It was incredible how it just left. And I thought back to what Jesus said. Bless those who hurt you. Pray for those who hurt you. And by doing that, I've seen the guy there a number of times since. We really don't know him as a friend, but I do know that God has a way of working, and He wants us to be forgiving people to others. Here's number 2. We need to forgive as we've been forgiven. Colossians chapter 3. I want to show you a verse there. Colossians 3. Turn to that. Look at verse 13. Colossians 3, verse 13. It says, bearing with one another and forgiving one another, if anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. That's pretty plain there. As Christ forgave you, then you need to forgive others. I want to tell you what, God's forgiven me a lot. How about you? Has He forgiven you a lot for your past, for your sins, for what's been there? If He's forgiven me a lot, then I need to forgive a lot. But you have to make that choice to forgive. If you don't, then we're going to be bitter. And that's not a good road to go down. You don't need to travel that because it causes angriness, it causes hatefulness. Choose rather to have faith and be willing to forgive than to be bitter. We become free when we can pray for someone. when we can love someone and they no longer have that power over us. I had some struggles. You have struggles. And maybe you have some struggles that are going on right now in your life. And if we're truly going to follow Jesus, we have to live a higher life than not forgiving people. But I think the scriptures are pretty plain about being like Christ. The world tells you to love those who love you and then hate everybody else. But that's not what Jesus said. If we're going to be like Him, if we're going to follow Him, we've got to do it differently than the world. You live by your faith. You live by loving your enemies and forgiving as you've been forgiving. And who knows? One day, that person that you forgive, one day you may be able to lead that person right to Jesus, right to Christ. And you may look at them and you may think, they don't deserve heaven. Guess what? We don't either. You don't, and I don't. But only through the grace of God that He sent His Son to die on that old rugged cross. That He died for me, but He also died for that other person. But the billboard in Tennessee said, "Forgive as Christ forgave." I've struggled with that ever since I saw that back in early August of last year. Forgive as Jesus forgave. Let me ask you tonight, are there things, is there something in your life that you need to let go of? Is there something there, maybe someone that's there that you need to clear things up with? God wants to comfort you. God wants to forgive you. And is there someone that you need to forgive? Tonight, if you're not a Christian, then start that forgiveness in your own life. That's where it needs to begin. That repentance, that baptism into Christ, that begins that life of forgiveness. And then you work on being like Jesus. You work on being like Christ. And when you see a billboard that puts you on the spot and says, "Be like Jesus in this way," you have Him to strengthen you. You've got God to help you through that. 10 years ago, it was a hard time for our whole family, but they are living with us right now as they're remodeling a house and to move into another one. And I look at them every night and see the 3 kids, and I think their mother taught me some valuable lessons, and that whole experience did. We're going to sing our invitation song. If we can help you in any way, we'd love to. Let's stand together and listen.
Just as